wanted to start just by, kind of explaining that I've been doing work on major infrastructure projects over the last 20 years. And a lot of my work has been around this mega project ecology, studying the cluster of infrastructure projects in and around London. They've been really, really well researched in the international research literature. Myself, Nuno, Jill, Andy Davies and others have been studying these projects. But for me, one thing that's interesting and picks up perhaps on things that we were talking about in the first panel session was when I went into Heathrow Terminal 5, I looked at that roof sub-project, how they lifted the roof. And there, everybody in that project said it was the best project they'd ever worked on. They really enjoyed being on that roof sub-project because the different leaders stepped forward at different points in that process. So a part of that, the architect was in charge, and then someone from the construction contractor was in charge, but they worked really well together as a team, and they shared the leadership around that team. And I was looking particularly at the single model environment in that project, and which is a forum to BIM and digital technologies. Then we worked on project leaders on the Olympics, on the London 2012 Olympics, on Crossrail, on Tideway, High Speed 2, major projects in and around London. And the research was focused on topic areas like data handover, which we looked at in the Olympics. How do you hand over data, all the difficulties of that organisational transformation to owners and operators, managing change. We did a set of studies around Crossrail, also working with Airbus and CERN in Europe, and looking at the dynamics of how you manage change on at a big scale on projects, configuration control, change management. We also did work looking at systems integration and how you integrate different systems, and especially when you've got this emerging complexity and uncertainty in these projects these days. And so for me, what's exciting about this set of projects is that not only were we working with practice, but we also worked with policy. And I became increasingly involved in the industry strategy in the UK. I worked on transforming construction, looking at how you brought off-site construction methods into the industry. I gave evidence at a parliamentary inquiry, sat on Construction Leadership Council, informed the work on building safely and on systems approaches to infrastructure delivery. And over the last couple of years, I've been in Sydney, and we've started to engage with the cluster of infrastructure projects that are now being built. And I think Sonia gave you the flavour of how this is a hot labour market. We're now building projects in Sydney that are on brownfield sites, so they're not the greenfield sites that the teams have been used to. They're increasing complexity. There's the challenge of getting the right projects at the right time. And we've been interested in studying this, and studying particularly how when you've got a cluster of projects in a geographic area, how you can learn across those projects and how you can bring best practice across those projects. As an expat in Australia, I've also found myself interested in how we learn across the globe. And so we've been doing a little bit of work looking at Sydney Metro and its international comparators that I've studied previously. So we've looked at Nagpur Metro, we've looked at London Crossrail. And what's interesting here is that, of course, the same companies go around the globe and sometimes the same individuals and get involved in these really major projects because they're of such a significant scale. And I think there's real opportunities for us here in Sydney through the research that we're doing to bring research, practice and policy together. And I think that's something that I'm really excited about, and I'm happy to connect with people around. I wanted to just touch on a couple of ideas that I've been developing in my research. So the first one of those is just standing back and taking a really broad view on how we make futures. So the work of making sense of possible and probable futures and evaluating, negotiating and giving order to preferred ones. Now, what we observed was that there were a set of scholars in different disciplines who were all looking at future making in some way or other. whether they were interested in projects, interested in research strategy, interested in design, interested in corporate strategy. And all of that's thinking about, if you think about all of those as being about future making, then one of the things that's interesting is that uncertainty makes the future not wholly available to planning. And so if we have a strategy of trying to plan everything, then we're going to find that we've got these emerging uncertainties and complexities through that process that we have to handle. And we've framed future making in the work that we've been doing as a form of inquiry with representations of the future while being present in the world. And that's a way of thinking about the kinds of collaborative processes that came up in our panel sessions, and the way in which we can bring stakeholders together through an inquiry, through a process of inquiry, and work with representations of the future to work out both how we build better, but also what we build. And the paper that's just on the slide is a bit of work that we did saying how difficult this is to do in this kind of environment where we're online. So we believe that to make futures that matter requires real engagement with people, with places, with materials. And when we're online, we have such little interaction with some of those things. So we set out a paper with some advice to managers about how you can deliberately bring feedback into that situation, be attentive to who and to what is missing, and to ask for and engage them in terms of trying to get their input. How you can not fixate on one solution too quickly, and I think this plays to things that Peter Colacino and others were saying. We have to move away from, oh, this is the solution, to thinking about, what's the problem and what are the alternatives that we might use to address that. And do we understand the problem properly, right? So the idea of inquiry starts before the problem. It starts with the indeterminate situation that you then formulate into a problem. And changing medium, so using more than one representation, not getting locked in too early. And very quickly, the second area that we've started to do some work on, and well, actually, we've been working on this for a number of years, but we've just written a paper around this idea of projects as interventions. And before I came to Sydney, I ran a Centre for Systems Engineering and Innovation at Imperial College in London. And we've been very interested in the systems approach, and how do you see projects as an intervention into wider systems? Working with my colleagues in civil engineering, they've really pushed me to think about infrastructure not just as an intervention into built environment systems or into the services that the built environment provides, but also into the natural environment. And myself and Lara Motti have just written a paper arguing that in a resource-constrained and changing world, the project scholarship community needs to revisit how it can conceptualize as a project, to understand it as an intervention into nature, experienced through a wide set of existing and future situations. Now, I know that's a challenging statement, but I think our observation was that that even when you look at the sustainability strategies of some of the major projects, nature gets lost because it all gets to lump together as ESG. And so, people are talking about their sustainability strategy in terms of growth, and not really taking on board some of the significant challenges around when you're making a future that matters, that's got material footprint on the world, how that engages with the natural environment.